Breaking generational trauma cycles is incredibly difficult. Despite a turbulent upbringing, our guest today channels her experiences into creating tools for family connection and mental health discussions. She stands as a shining example of maternal empowerment, guiding others towards self discovery and the joy of living their best lives. This is a story of a mother's resilience with Courtney Cote. Is that how you say your last name, by the way, Courtney? Did I just put a European spin to it?
I loved it. I'm actually going to go with that for the rest of my life.
I think you should. I really enjoyed it. and,
Yeah,
and
I mean, it's French, so it's Cote, Cote. I'm
all
like
right. Well,
Cody, so Courtney
I
Cody.
tried to be as French as possible with Cote there. But
That was
Courtney,
amazing.
we go way back. Like, and I want the audience to know this. We know each other from our years in Boston as younger college students, and we shared friends there. And when I knew you there, you would never know about someone's history, and this is something I've learned. You meet people, they're happy, you were perfectly normal, happy college student. I've known you over the years, and you grew a family and all these things, and you seem like the epitome of someone that lived healthy, happy, never had any issues or problems,
Mhm.
as most people do through their social media world these days. But your journey was influenced a lot by your family upbringing, which wasn't always perfect. So why don't we start there about what were some of the traumas that you had dealt with growing up that impacted you along the way, but weren't even probably noticeable from the outside world?
Sure. Yeah, gosh, it's so true, right? I mean, how many people do we know that we think they're just amazing and
Right.
they are amazing, but they have a lot of inner chaos, let's say. So my upbringing was pretty interesting. I mean, I had a great upbringing, I think, for the most part, but there was a lot of, I would say, little T's, chronic little T's, little trauma.
Mm,
So, parents divorced from a very young age. Before I was one, I went back and forth to my mother's and my father's every other week
mhm,
until I was 13. And then I was legally at the age to move in with my father in the country, Chester, New Hampshire, where I was able to go to a much better school that would springboard me into college because I was a collegiate athlete. So that was kind of the fast and furious, but like I guess the upbringing was fascinating because when I look back and I did like this like first personal growth workshop where it was an emotional boot camp and I put myself in for like a week. And it was a bunch of other people. But I had to paint the picture of my childhood and I had to use, like everyone was in the room and I had to use different people as props. And I was like, you're my dad, you're my stepmom, you're my mom, and you're my mom's boyfriend. And like sat there for an hour and a half, almost laughing.
hmm,
And they were like, funny, real funny. And I was like, it is kind of funny. After an hour and a half, I finally cracked and I just started bawling my eyes out because I finally like the layers shed and the armor came off and I was like, ooh, this isn't actually really funny. So I'm like going back there right now, clearly. It was very pivotal. So
right.
what that was for me was I was an only child and every single one of these figures in my life drank alcohol.
Mm,
And they were very, of course, present when they wanted to be and very amazing for a lot of reasons. But there was also a lot of, for me, isolation. So as an only child going back and forth and like trying to deal with the custody battles and the chaos and me just kind of being this pawn, you can imagine how maybe unsettling that could be. So I think that at the time I just, put my armor on, grab my tools that I knew at the time, and I did the best I could. Sports was a savior. I was in gymnastics from 3 to 13, then played softball, and all the college or all the high school sports, and then chose softball in college. So yeah, I mean, I just think that it's interesting once we grow up and have children. Those were my beautiful miracles that instead of me raising them, they're truly raising me because I'm seeing so many of my own trauma, right? And so I can take that back to, oh my gosh, now that I know when I'm reacting, that's not, has nothing to do with them and has everything to do with my childhood. So if there's something there that's still, boiling over, I'm like, ooh, what is that? Like, what is this trying to teach me? What am I supposed to be like learning from this? And so it's a much different relationship with myself as it is with others. But it took me clearly a little bit to get here. So
Yeah, and like you said, we all have these traumas, and whether they're little T's or not, it's funny because I was listening to Joe Rogan podcast talk about this with
love
like
him.
cons yeah, and it's it's always a comical take, but we find traumas also within our very good lives, we could say, right?
Mhm.
Whereas maybe the generational trauma of our grandparents through World War I or World War II was a
Correct.
very, deep trauma and very, something to that absolutely impacted them.
Yeah.
We find traumas in maybe, an Amazon delivery coming a day late. Yeah, and
That's,
it's true. It's
yeah.
it's like everything
Yeah.
is relational to what it
Yeah.
is. And,
My kids.
I'm not going to put people down because that trauma, even though it's laughable, it is. It can be in the body felt that way and actually impact our mental health in the same way as the war impacted our
Mhm.
grandparents. And
Yeah,
it's
agreed.
everything is so, pivotal and interesting when you break it down to who carries that trauma.
Yeah.
And we all will deal with greater traumas such as loss. And that's something you dealt with, afterwards. You had a sudden loss of your father as well. Can you talk about how that impacted you and what you had to do to deal with that and kind of make the best as you moved forward?
Yeah. This is a tough one right now because
Mm,
my best friend also just lost her father. So I'm flying up literally tomorrow to go to the funeral service for
yeah,
Saturday.
yeah.
And they were good friends. So um my father and I had an interesting relationship. I mean, I was an only child and I absolutely, I cherish a lot of our memories. And growing up though, as humans do with our beautiful brains, we kind of, make up these stories. And one of the stories I made up about my father was that he doesn't love me.
Mm,
And he did, totally. And I knew that later on. It just at the time didn't feel like it because he was a former Marine. Definitely, a son, the oldest, that had to do all the chores on the farm. And like, right, you talk about generational cycles and trauma. And there was the World War II and his father. And then there was the Great Depression. And, his childhood and environment was interesting. And no one said, I love you or I'm proud of you. Or, his parents didn't teach him anything about unconditional love. It was, straps, get your boots on and get to the farm and take care of all your other siblings. And it was a lot. And so I think for a Marine then to grow, to raise me, I mean, I have so much respect and so much grit and resilience and, values. And I wouldn't trade it in for the world. Um, but there was something missing, Casper, when my father like went into rehab, right? Inpatient suicidal ideation for 30 days when I was 8. And so
mm,
that kind of like clearly left an imprint because I'm like, he's teaching me all these things, right? Like there's always this lecture, but what is it what is this? Because clearly it's not working for him.
yeah.
And so I just remember at very young age saying to myself, he's teaching me all these things, he's lecturing me on all this stuff, right? But why isn't it working for him?
Mm,
And so years and years and years later, he got sober. Both him and my mom actually got sober at the same time at 8 years old when I was 8. And then, I mean, I feel like that's literally truly our saving grace for how our relationship has morphed into a beautiful, extraordinary, father daughter and mother daughter. So I think that when my father came down during COVID, he lived with us for some time, got him his own place, and then full circle, I saw exactly what he struggled with his whole life. And it was the fact that through the conversations of COVID, because clearly I had plenty of time to chat, we really dug deep and we tore some layers back. And he was also suicidal during that time, suicidal ideation, and went into the, in and out of inpatient. So it has been throughout my life, first when I was 8, and then again when I was in my 40s. So, just years ago during COVID. And I feel like at the end of the day, I realized that my father never loved himself.
Mm,
And he had unconditional love for me because I was his child. Well, I can't say unconditional love. I have to say conditional love because that's all he knew.
mm,
Right. And so knowing that all the stories that he told me, he said, he didn't even teach me this directly. He taught me this indirectly, where I was like, Dad, all of these stories and the fact that you haven't forgiven yourself yet, this is unconditional love. You haven't learned it. Like, you don't have it for yourself. You would never hurt a fly, right? He worked for Easter Seals, special needs, the most amazing individual. Went and worked at like an adult daycare, drove his father to and from, when he was very, very, I don't know, 90s. And he just had a beautiful soul and just I think was conditioned into a different environment, right? From again, that kind of generational cyclical effect of trauma. And so when I told him this and we talked about it, he found it within. Like, he actually, I could see him from his head logically just like drop and like shift into his heart and
mm,
just bawl his eyes out. And it was the day after Christmas, and he said, he goes, and he always said Courtney Cote. He says, Courtney Cote, I have a dream. And he says, I want to live 19 more years. And he was 71 at the time, so that would have put him at 90.
mm,
And he's like, I've never had a dream in my life. He goes, but I want to live 19 more years. And it was crazy because I feel truly, Casper, that I freed his soul. Like, together, our
mm,
beautiful conversations and our connection, it freed his soul prior to him going into the hospital that next day with massive symptoms. He had had symptoms that year before, misdiagnosed from the VA, but ended up going in and getting diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and passing 12 days later.
mm.
So it was really fast. So, I mean, I think that kind of was a long-winded answer, but I feel like there's some just crazy, full circles and learnings and lessons and things that maybe he didn't even truly mean to teach me, but it's like, holy crap, now I know what my life mission is and my purpose, because
Yeah.
it's like he gave that to me. We both gave each other a gift before he passed,
Yeah.
you
And
know.
children choose their parents for the lessons they will
Yeah,
get and the
that's
lessons they will
exactly
give,
correct. Hmm.
right? It's not the other way around that many people
That's
think that way.
correct.
And it's interesting. I mean, I can absolutely see that as well. And I think so many people have very interesting relationships with their parents. There's
Hmm.
always a level of love in some way, but you're right. What kind is that? Is that a conditional because they are who they are, we must? Is that more of the unconditional level that you just have usually, with children? But it's a struggle
Hmm.
always, especially because there are generational differences. I agree. My father was very stoic in many ways. It wasn't very, emotionally
Yeah.
out there. And you mentioned that you had these conversations during the pandemic and everything. How
Hmm.
difficult was that? Because what I've realized, Courtney, I'll just give you like a little bit of an example. What I'm getting at is that a lot of the patients I have seen that walk into this center, as many patients I've met across the world, a lot of their initiating factors deal with emotional traumas that are really in a familial relation to parents, to brother, sister, or something
Hmm.
that they simply will not let go, address, speak of, and bottle up and become biochemical issues that are chronic disease factors. How difficult, though, was it? Because most people just don't want to touch it. How difficult was it for you to start to address those things with your father, someone that is somewhat closed off emotionally, maybe unavailable and everything? How difficult was that starting point?
Mm. So I did a course called Landmark Forum in San Diego for
Mm,
my, I think I was 29. And then I was like so drinking the Kool-Aid that there was like an advanced course that I did for my 30th birthday. And it's very much around like old stories and life really has no meaning. Like humans are meaning making machines. Like really, this is just an essential oils bottle. There's
mm,
no meaning to it. We just create meaning around it, right? So everything's very much like as is, it is what it is. And then we create the meaning and we stack. So, there were so many golden nuggets in this forum. And then they're all about, extraordinary relationships. And like my life truly isn't going to be extraordinary if my relationship with my father, my relationship with my mother is not extraordinary. Kind of the philosophy that I took away. So I remember calling my dad, being like, Dad, you have to do this with me, right? Or
mm.
you have to go do Landmark Forum. And he was like, Yeah, right. And I was like, No, just like, just chat with them, like just have a conversation. And after a little while, he's like, Yeah, okay, I promise. I promise. Because I was like, You promise? He's like, Yes, I promise. So they called him up and they said, blah, blah, blah. Of course, they're probing, trying to get into, all the, like, they haven't even built a rapport yet, Casper, and they're already asking him about his relationship with his father. And now
Yep.
he's like, click, hung up. And so I call him, I'm like all excited because I'm like, hey, did you register? Did you sign up? And he was like, oh, the French dysfunctional way from my dad's side, like, no, I didn't. No, they asked me about Papa and blah blah blah. And I was just like, huh, okay. And then I hung up on him because I was so I was just like, you could see the generational cycle just in that
Yep.
effect, right? Um, so I didn't talk to him for a week, and that was like unheard of. So
Mm,
he calls me back because I think he felt my energy and was like, oh crap, I really disappointed her. So he called me back and he said a week later, I just want to let you know that I signed up for Landmark Forum and I took Papa out to lunch. So
ooh,
it was like this massive,
mhm.
well, I would say massive. It was a mini breakdown for a really solid breakthrough. So then he did Landmark Forum and, got the gems out of that. And then from there, we were amazing. But that one line during that call, Casper, I said, Dad, I want an extraordinary relationship. Like it would mean a lot to me if you did Landmark Forum. And I just remember him saying, this is why I hung up on him. He said, Courtney Cote, he goes, our relationship is good enough. And I
Mm,
went click.
mm.
So I kind of, not the hammer, but it was more like the phone, like click. So yeah, that was our turning point. Like truly that was our turning point. And I had to be vocal about it, right? I think that there's a lot of people that want that extraordinary relationship, but for some reason, those hard conversations, we're scared to like, oh my God, what are they going to say? Or maybe we already feel like we know what they're going to say, but that's not even maybe what they're going to say. And we make up
Right.
these stories and we live in the future instead of just being like right here and right now. So that was just, yeah, I just vividly remember that was a very pivotal moment for our relationship.
I'm sure, and it goes to show it's little actions and just the first attempt alone can be so impactful. Like you said, it was just, hey, Dad tried it, right? You took a risk there, he took a risk. You ended up like not and hanging up, but then look what happened within a week's time.
Exactly.
Like it already planted a seed, and that was very difficult. It's often difficult to get your hands in the dirt, dig it out, sit there, wait, be uncomfortable about it.
Oh
But
yeah.
in the end, I'm sure you could say this was such a healing, event for you and your father, two people healing.
Massive. And there's two ways that I could have handled that week, Casper, thinking about it, going back like in time. And it again comes back to how much I've grown and how much I really value myself and I'm like all self-worth now. And I had tons of self-confidence growing up. I played sports. I was confident. I'd go to parties. I never needed to really drink alcohol. I feel like some people drink alcohol because they're like, it makes me more fun or it makes me more social. And I was like, I don't need to drink. I need a downer, not an upper, you
Right.
know? And so I just feel like confidence was always not like it wasn't a problem for me. Probably from gymnastics at a young age and just being on the balance beam and being in this, all four events like vault and beam and floor and bars. So, but it was the worth piece. And so that week I remember like I could have drank, like I could have just been like, this is awful. And I just remember not and being uncomfortable with that discomfort, right? And not taking any action and just saying it is what it is. And choosing to go for runs in San Diego, right? Like 75 degrees, America's finest city. I'm like, this is beautiful. Here's where I'm at. It is what it is right now. And I was just so in the mindfulness and so in the present that I
Mm,
didn't need to do anything. And I feel like that's such a big, like massive key takeaway too, that I had to learn. Like just be uncomfortable with being, or start being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
yeah.
Like dance in the rain. Yeah, it's kind of wet and it's kind of meh and it's not really like ideal, but holy crap, is it almost, and it's almost fun. Like I actually yearn to do that now. I want to go dance in the rain, like rain in especially in San Diego, because it never rained.
Yeah, yeah. That's an event to truly be
Yeah,
celebrate and run in the streets for in San Diego. Yeah.
exactly.
And it's interesting, like it's the author and spiritual leader Pima Chodron says, wrote the book, Comfortable with Uncertainty, right? And it's true,
Mhm.
nothing in our lives is certain,
Yeah.
and you have to suddenly become very comfortable with it, but it's very, very difficult. We stress about everything.
Yeah.
We, are depressed about the past, we're anxious about the future, and these
Mhm.
days it's much more prevalent, I think, with the advent of technology, information at your fingertips,
Mm.
a very different upbringing. And you now are a mother, and you see this, I'm sure, with your
Mhm.
children. What are your ways of taking everything you've learned from childs to your parents, that relationship, addressing generational trauma, addressing these things that now you are bestowing? How are you doing that with your own children?
Yeah, it's a fine line, right? Because I'm so spiritual now. I was prior to my father passing, and then since his passing, I'm so spiritual. And to see my children as like soul to soul, like I have a soul and they have a soul, and it's this parallel relationship versus I feel like I like to call it the old 80s outfit, right? Where it's like the hierarchical, like I'm going to dictate and I'm going to tell you
Yep.
what to do, and you're going to be seen, not heard. I'm like, that's an old 80s outfit. Let's like, maybe take it out for a costume party, but let's put it over here for now. Let's go fashion forward, New York City, right? Let's go try on a new outfit, which is spirituality, soul to soul. My girls have their own karmic cosmic journey.
Mhm.
And if I even have any type of ego to be able to be like, these are values, this is what you need to do, or this is what it looks like, it's so hard for me now because I'm almost like I need to just let them have their own like journey, have their own lessons, have their own values without me even giving them any. So I say that, but then now I also clearly have them, we have bumpers. So I
Yeah.
give them a gratitude journal and I teach
Mm.
them like, girls, I'm like, if I could just save you decades of pain, like, they're gonna have pain, we're human. But I'm like, if I could just save you and you could get there faster to living an abundant life, right? An abundance we can dance through and flow through in our feminine energy. So trying to keep them in their femininity as we're very much tomboys and sometimes jump into our masculine. So there's a lot here. But I just
Mhm.
try to give them these beautiful bumpers and just say, you know what? You're gonna flow, you're gonna glide, you're gonna go. And here's what I've learned. Take it or leave it. And so I don't want to dictate. I don't want to say this is it, this is it, this is the way it is. It's like here's a way. You choose. Try it on. If it works for you, amazing. If not, don't worry about it. But to see me, there was a behavioral experiment that I tried. Like they weren't reading years ago. I can't remember. They were like, oh, I need a face cloth or I need water or something, like all the stuff before bed. And I'm like, okay, clearly they're acting out because I wasn't present or I didn't give them what they needed, like the 10-minute, 20-minute, miracle moments. So I started to read in bed. And I remember like I would always do my chores. But I was like, I'm gonna read in bed and see what happens because I was doing a lot of personal growth. And I'm like, monkey see, monkey do. We can't just preach. We have to be it for
Yeah.
them to be it. And so I read in bed for no joke 2 weeks. And now my girls, this was years ago. Now they are chapter books. I mean, I was on 2 board meetings last night till 11:30 at night, and I see them like army crawling into bed after I was done with their books. So they were supposed to put themselves to bed. Ooh, I like the fireworks. I don't know how I just did that.
I was gonna
Oh,
say.
that was amazing. So they literally like ninja crawled and army crawled to bed and at 11:30 after they had read books for like hours. And I
Mm.
can't get mad at them for being awake at 11:30 because they finished 2 books like between the two of them. So I was like, good night, girls. Like, I love you. I'll see you in the morning. Like tomorrow morning's probably not gonna be fun for you, but that's your karmic journey. So, there's a lot of beautiful, honestly, I think it's values. It just, if I can just continuously say, girls, what time is it? And they say now, and I'm like, where are you? They say here. And I'm like, beautiful. We're here and now. And so values, mindfulness, if I can just continue to be and not do, like if I can continue to be the example and just be exercise, be like nature, right? All the natural dopamine hits versus them maybe going after or nor like some of the, social media stuff. It's a quick dopamine hit, right? Like as long as I can just continue to maybe just feed them with beautiful, tangible items and intangible, right? Like fruits and veggies and give them all the beautiful lay of the land, then we just pray that they choose wisely.
Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
so much of that, healthy parenting that you just mentioned comes from starting to prioritize your own self-care and
Oh
your
my
own
gosh.
emotional well-being. But I
Totally.
do know, through observation, through speaking with people, there is this thing, a little bit of this mother martyr syndrome that I need to
Mm.
place them first. I
Oh my
don't
gosh.
have time to eat well. I don't have time to do all that stuff, that self-care stuff. And it's all about my children. You work with mothers probably that, have
Whew.
this kind of a thing. What do you tell them? Like, how do you break through that? Because I could also understand most
Yeah.
parents feel that, of course, it's a sacrifice. We know that. A child's, life belongs in your hands and the decisions you make. It's a big, big sacrifice.
Massive.
Nevertheless, so much of what you're saying is it starts with you. What they
Absolutely.
see you doing is so much more important. How do you get through to people that say, I just don't have the time, Courtney? I'm just doing this and this all for them, and I'll put myself last.
Yeah. So the easiest way is when we all travel. I mean, it's like such an easy example of when when we're on the airplane, the, flight attendant always comes on and they're like, hey, if anything happens, like make sure you put on your own oxygen mask first
They do.
before you put somebody else's on. And
Right.
so I travel a ton. So for somebody that travels, they'll get that. For someone else that doesn't travel, then, it might be a little bit harder. But we honestly have to give them permission to, like, I personally have to give them permission. Like I have to have them sign, I'm gonna have them sign something like, this is our agreement. You have permission to take care of you first before your children or your spouse or your care, your parents. Because we do, like, I mean, when I was in the thick of it, I mean, Adam, the father of my children, deployed to Afghanistan for a year. Like,
Mm,
not supposed to happen,
mm,
but it happened. And the girls were 1 and 3 at the time. And, I luckily was very habitual and I had amazing rituals of working out. Like I just know my mental health. And if I don't work out, I am not okay. And I mean, I remember Adam, he would like push me out the door and be like, go to yoga, please, just please do us all a favor and go to yoga. And then I'd come back and I'd be like, hello, right? I'd be like so much happier. And I would thank him, because sometimes we are very much in it and we're all there for everybody else. And women, especially, we're such nurturers and we're such caretakers. And, it almost when we don't have that worth, uh, like when I struggle with my dad, it's so spiral because and so affiliated because I'm like, shit, if I'm not feeling worthy, then I'll give my kids more and then I'll feel worthy. Oh, I'll do this for my spouse, then I'll feel more worthy. oh, let me go pour my heart into this job and then I'll be more worthy.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, I was born 100% amazing, like worthy, divine, angelic, right? And like God doesn't start with junk, and He certainly didn't start with me or you. So when we know that we're already perfectly whole and complete as is right here and right now, and I don't need to do or be anything in order to have that worth, then life is so much different. And then with intention and values, my trajectory and, the decisions I make are so much different. Otherwise, you're like a leaf blowing in the wind. So when we have our values, when we have our worth, when we have our self-love, and when we know what's most important, that's our North Star, you know?
Yeah. And without
So
that North Star, we often feel lost, right? We often feel a little bit not guided because we don't know where we're going.
yeah,
And that's a big part of what I believe is kind of the spiritual level of where we become unhealthy and where things start to, fall down into the other areas of the mental side, the mind side, and the body, the
yeah,
biochemistry. And I know you have the website, like I Love Me Unconditionally. That's a beautiful one. And
it's
we talk
long.
about that. And even when you look at work of people like Dr. David Hawkins and the scale of consciousness and where unconditional love is so
Mm-hmm.
high, where
Mm-hmm.
80% of the population out there is in this low of grief, apathy, sadness, all these lower frequencies and vibrations. It's nice to say, like I love myself unconditionally, but what does that really mean? Like when someone is in those lower states and it's hard to break free. It's a vicious like cycle downwards usually.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone that's like, I want to love myself, I just don't even know where to start?
Yeah, that is a big one. So for me and for everyone that I've worked with, it's shifting from your head to your heart. And I know that that's so
Mm.
cliche because everyone's like, oh, just, make decisions from your heart. And I was always like, but what does that mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't understand. And so it just is, it's work, and it's, you know, words, if I could define it, is essentially no judgment for oneself,
Yeah.
absolute and utter grace for oneself, right? Absolute zero. There's no wrong, there's no right, there's no good, there's no bad. It's I am a soul living in this human body, right? We are these divine, angelic, light beings, and we are trapped in this human body on this earthbound experience.
Yeah.
And unconditional love is absolute, like legit. I have to forgive myself on a daily basis. And even sometimes like minute by minute, I have to forgive myself for things, because we're all human. And so what good is it going to do for me to sit over here in this shame and in this guilt? That doesn't do me any good. That's a low vibration state.
Hmm.
And so to shift my beautiful mind into a like my girls, I mean, my girls taught me so much of this. Like I love them. I would do anything for them. Like I'm not going to kick them out if they lie to me. I'm just going to guide them and be like, maybe we could work on something else in the future. Maybe we could try this differently. And so yeah, to just, and I think honestly, Casper, with my dad passing and that whole conversation around him not forgiving himself, and that's why he was still suicidal. I
Mm.
was like, holy shit, like literally. Like if he forgave himself and truly loved himself, there would be no suicidal ideation on the radar whatsoever. And
Yeah.
so I just made that connection. That's the nucleus, that's the yeast to the bread of of a happy life, right? It's that unconditional love, that forgiveness for oneself, the grace that you were to give yourself, and the non-judgment. I'm not going to judge myself because I'm doing the best I can with the resources that I have, right? Until I learn better, or Maya Angelou, like until I know better, then I do better. Till I, let's see, well, how does that go? I'm going to do until I know better, then I do better. I don't know. It's basically, you know what I'm saying.
We get
You
the
do the
point,
best you
yeah.
can, right? You do the best you
Yes,
can until you know
you
better,
do.
and then you do better.
And it's true. We have to be very, I think the idea is like, we preach this idea of compassion for others when we don't even have it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think all of us, really are we're own worst critics. And
Mm,
we put ourselves down, and now we compare so much because everything is there available on our screens, on our little
mm,
black mirrors that show us these wonderful lives of people around us that we're like, damn, my life sucks, right? I'm terrible. I'm not doing enough. I'm not making
yeah.
all these things of comparison, which are really detrimental to us.
Detrimental.
Yeah, and to quickly go back, because I found it, interesting because your father obviously dealt with those emotional things, but there's also this theory, New Germanic medicine and Dr. Hammer's work that shows that emotions can be
Mm,
initiation points for things like cancer.
mm,
And it's so often overlooked how much our mental state and emotional well-being
oof.
impact us in those ways, even with cancers, chronic diseases. Because we could say, of course, depression, suicidal ideology are awful, but we don't connect that really to the physical type of things.
I
And then when you get cancer, right, it's chemo. That's what you need. You need chemo radiation, one of the approved medical treatments there, but it's not you need to work on your emotional state. How important is it to you to focus on a daily basis on emotional well-being as a mother, as a person trying to always improve on themselves?
Oh my gosh, Casper, that's like hitting the nail on the head with truly why I feel like my father passed because I feel like he lived in that chronic state of um, deep rest, depressed, and
Mhm.
disease,
Mhm.
and scarcity, and fear, and sadness. And, yes, did he preach gratitude? I'm so thankful I knew gratitude, but I was very cynical about it because I was like, oh, I'm grateful for clean water. I'm grateful for a roof over my head. I'm grateful for, everything and anything, honestly. But until I actually did Tony Robbins priming exercise and we had to like shut our eyes and feel and get into our body and like literally put my hands over my heart for I'd say we did this for 10 minutes and it was like, okay, three of your most, three grateful things, three things you're grateful for right now. So it
Mm.
could be like today, I'm so grateful to be with you. Like Casper, honestly, like I'm so grateful to be here. Like I am so happy to be here with you. And then I can be like, okay, let's go back to last week or a year ago. And then I'm like, holy shit, like my dad actually walks me down the aisle. Like he lived to walk me down the aisle. I can get there and I can feel it. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm so grateful that my girls are so healthy. Like when they both came out, I was like, okay, 10 fingers, 10 toes, they're amazing, right? Like I was like, they're healthy. And so I can get there right now and I can feel that emotion and gratitude as I understand it is like this massive healing frequency.
Mhm.
And so when we can get into gratitude, it's the best attitude and it trumps fear and everything else because you can't have both simultaneously. And
That's
so
right.
that is the biggest thing. Like everything you just said is like, I have chills, or we call them now God bumps because it's like the
Mm.
spiritual download. And I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head because that's how I talk to the girls now. And when we can feel it and get into our body, we don't need to go chase that next best thing to achieve joy or happiness or love. Like we can literally sit here right now and just get into our heart space and actually feel that love and emotion and connection and joy and laughter. And that's the healing part. And so when you say that, the emotions do potentially cause chronic disease and then potentially mortality, I've seen it. I've witnessed it and I've seen it. And I'm training for longevity, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm doing yoga, I'm a yogi. I'm wanting to be on the floor with my grandkids, right? I mean, there's a big why here. And I want to break that generational link of crap that's not even ours. Like we inherited this shit, excuse my French, right? we inherited all this. And I'm like, give it back. I don't need it. And I don't even want to give it back. I want to like basically throw it out into another dimension, transmute that, right? And then that's it. Like transmute it into another form. And that's it. Like, let's just get rid of it and create a new link and have this beautiful new glide path for our kids and then their grandkids. And that's an epic legacy for me. You
Yeah.
know, that's beautiful.
And that's the beauty of it. It's not that you need to, negate it or remove it even. It is a transmutation. It's an, I know
Yeah.
you appreciate alchemy, and it's an alchemical,
Yes.
movement of taking something and creating something. Energy never really dies. You have to transmute it. And
Correct.
so that's what you can do if you have the proper tools and you go about it and you put it as a priority. You work with a number of mothers that are seeking to kind of do what you do, and you have so much in your toolkit. And
Yeah.
it's the yoga, it's the meditation, it's the gratitude. You've been to so many events, Tony Robbins, so much.
Yeah.
Where do you start with someone? Because obviously this is years and years of work you've done.
Yeah.
And there's so many entry points that you could go, but it also is kind of overwhelming. Holy cow, Courtney, you're doing so much. I don't have this, but I'm trying to find myself. I'm trying to love myself and stop that, be the best parent for my children and the best person out there for myself. Where do you usually start with, let's say mothers or anyone that works with you?
Yeah, so first we start with breakthrough call. And I mean, just first and foremost, let's see where you're at. What are your biggest challenges? I mean, really feeling it and understanding, like, if nothing changes, like, what's the worst case scenario? And that's an emotional consequence. All the moms that I talk to, they're just like, I'm so stressed out, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so
Mm,
tired, I'm exhausted. And half of them are like, I'm like, well, what are you doing for yourself? And they're like, nothing. And I'm like, okay, okay, right. And a lot of them are, yeah, again, just sacrificing, nurturing, caretaking, like everything we've talked to already. And so I have an 8-week crash course, more or less. I need to fine tune that. It's called the Me First eight
mhm,
week program. And it's the first week is the life wheel. And the life wheel is so important because I think from a financial standpoint, we all like, we balance our portfolios and, we're like, is this foreign or domestic or, how much is in here? And, how risky is this based on my age? And, I think we all do that, but why don't we do that for our life? Why don't we sit down and figure out, how am I doing in relationships, career, spirituality, mentality, right? Social, like my social right now is a 2. And so the life wheel, when you think about it, from zero to the bullseye, from the bullseye out to the perimeter, this is the 10. You want a beautiful, harmonious tire to drive on. You don't want my one piece of the pie, which is social, a 2, because now I'm like wonky and driving on more or less a flat tire. That's
yeah.
not harmonious, and I'm not living in alignment with what my true soul is craving and yearning for. So that's just an example of like week 1 is the life wheel. And so we're like, let's give us a benchmark. Let's give us a um, common foundation so we're both on the same page of where how, and then what 2 things could we do to get there. So one mom, for instance, was very much overweight, not taking care of herself in the way that she could and the way she knew. And I'm like, well, do what's your morning routine like? And so she just ended up adding lemon to her water. So every
Mm,
morning she'd wake up, and every single morning for like however many 2 days, a week, 3 weeks, she had massive IBS too, and some bowels and like some bowels and stomach issues, and no joke, like 2 days, 3 days, lemon water on an empty stomach, no more bowel, like no more digestive issues and crampage in the morning. So just like the little things, like that's just one example. I mean, so you can imagine the entire life wheel. It is a little bit overwhelming, but it's such a beautiful thing to see. Wow, this is my life on paper. Now you put it up on your refrigerator and you have a couple things to just work on, and then you move the needle. And like if we're driving or if we're sailing, if we just move that steering wheel, right, a little bit, our trajectory is that much more. Like we are in a totally different trajectory. So it's just little baby steps, new routines, new rituals. And then I'm like, you do the rituals, I'll show you the results, you know? So we don't need to go get medals and certifications, and we just need a PhD in results in our own life. And some people aren't even, taking care of us first. And when we're the best versions of ourselves, then we can show up for everybody else and be the best version for them, which is going to be just a beautiful new song and dance. It's a totally
Yeah.
different dynamic.
It's
So,
amazing how these small shifts, these little things, lemon, in your water in the morning can have such an impact. And we usually get hung up that we have to have these giant shifts and groundbreaking events that are going to be so
yeah.
much effort to really change our lives. But our lives are, aligned for our best and highest purpose already. And sometimes
Hmm.
we just need to make the small little steps, celebrate those small wins, and keep
Hmm.
going. and
Yeah.
and then you have this, the vicious disease cycle becomes this upward cycle and this evolution towards a higher purpose and a
Hmm.
higher way of living. So I mean,
Higher
Courtney,
vibration, higher
yeah.
frequency, all of that. Absolutely. I want to be levitating. Like, let's all levitate.
We all want to get to nirvana, right? We all want something, but there's something to be said about, the ups and downs, as we spoke about earlier, of healing and understanding that, it isn't a linear, just upward motion. Sometimes the downs are part of the evolutionary process in leading us towards a higher, up then
Oh,
as
they're
we
needed.
continue to
No,
go up.
every breakthrough, I say every breakdown is an absolute opportunity for a breakthrough,
Yes.
right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's just like every time I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like it's almost like the kernel in the microwave, the popcorn kernel, right? It's just like it's
Yeah.
getting hot and it's hot and it's like, oh gosh. And it's this breakdown of the molecule, but then pop. It's this
Right.
beautiful breakthrough and it's delicious.
And
So,
then if you could reframe every challenge or failure as something of a learning lesson that's going to, help you improve, then is it truly a failure or a challenge, or is it a blessing and a
mhm,
success? It's just how you
absolutely.
frame it, and it's just how much time you give it. At the time it
Mhm,
happens, it may seem devastating, and it probably will feel that way, of course. But if you allow it to unfold and have faith and use
yeah.
it to your highest level, it usually turns out to be a very good thing. And that goes
Or
with
yeah, I
disease as well.
wouldn't trade it in for the world. I mean, you got to get through it, and it's so much self dignity.
Yeah.
It's just who you are, and it's all part of the makeup and the energy and the identity, and I think everybody, when they can make their mess their message, like the world, we could all live so much better, and we would learn so much faster. You know.
Mm, yeah, so much. Courtney, I could speak to you for hours, but where can people learn more about you, get in touch with you? Where can they yeah, go to?
Yeah, so the website ilovemeunconditionally.com. So it's intentionally that long for a reason. I want people to be able to say that out loud.
Yeah.
ilovemeunconditionally.com. So that's a little bit about me, and there's my courses in there. They can book a link on Calendly, have a breakthrough session, and just have the first step to a new kind of, I like to call it, my old self was my Courtney 2.0 or 1.0, and now it's Courtney 2.0, right? But I didn't change. It's just almost, for me, it was shedding the layers and shedding the armor. And when my dad left, I just visioned him taking my literally my armor over the rainbow with him, and now it's like a beautiful artifact, and I
Mm,
don't need it anymore. I'm just completely and utterly open to get and receive pain, because I know it's just going to help me grow. So I just there's a lot of, I know it's tough to dive into the mud, but I think we're gonna get there that much faster when we
absolutely.
do. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
listen, I knew Courtney 1.0 over 20 years ago, but to see Courtney 2.0 today, it's amazing. It's an amazing transformation. I'm
thank
I'm I'm I'm
you.
proud to kind of know you
I'm
and
proud of
connect this way.
you.
I mean,
I
it's
know.
been probably, like we said, 20 years since we last literally spoke, but I've been in each other's circles the whole time, but I haven't connected with you, and this was an amazing way to do it.
It
And yeah,
was. I
incredibly
agree.
proud of everything
Very
you're
cool.
doing. So
Me
thank you
too.
so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you for
Yeah.
everything that you're doing. And I have to come see you, so we'll catch up
Please,
because
yeah, let's continue this.
I
And
wish there was
yeah.
something like you in. I mean, I'm in Kentucky now,
You're in
so
Kentucky now. I know that's not exactly the highest place where I'd like to expand to, but who knows? Listen, I want this everywhere, and it isn't just about the physicality of the place. It's
yeah.
about the approach, as you know. It's about the
Mhm.
mentality, the attitude, the higher, vibrations we're all trying to reach and how to get there. And that doesn't
Yeah,
just mean it's medical treatment, but of course, there are these things that serve as catalysts too. So
yeah.
it's always nice to
Well,
have, but you're always have an open invitation here in New York, and
thank you.
I'd love to see you. And thank you again for coming on and shining your light.
Yes, I appreciate you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in person sooner than later.
Absolutely. And be sure to go visit ilovemeunconditionally.com for more information. Until next time, continue writing your own healing story.